Hi. Today we have something extra exciting on the workbench that we're going to fix. This is a NuTone model IMA806, also referred to as the dreaded 806. I went back and looked. The very last 806 that I worked on was 8 years ago. This is not a model that you see very often. Why? Because it was probably the second biggest disaster model NuTone ever made. It had nothing but problems from day one, and it had a very short production life. As near as I can recall, it was only manufactured for about 3 years, maybe 4, maybe, but not any more than that. I was a young beginning installer back in those days. This came out in 1982, and we actually have an actual NuTone Intercom catalog from 1982, and it says new IMA806 radio intercom with optional telephone answering convenience from any speaker. That was part of the downfall of the whole thing. The 806 was, I believe, supposed to be the model that launched what is commonly referred to amongst NuTone people as the era of modern intercom systems. We're going to leave behind all of the old models. The old models, which are still available in 1982. And it has a lot of pages in here. We have 11 pages about the 806, which is a lot in a product catalog. But we still have IMD 313s. We still have IMA 303s. We have old school intercoms, IMA203s. These are models that came out in 1973, and they're still available. Gone is the IMA 406 because the 806 took its place. It's a 6-wire system just like the 406 was, and it was a new revolutionary model that was going to launch the new era of intercoms. Look, we still even have SM428s. Great system. Classic 80s model. And we have the rarely seen and hard to explain I600 selective call intercom, which I've never made a video about because, again, not because it was a problem, you just don't see them very often. We'll talk about that maybe in another video. So what was the problem with the 806? Well, the problem with the 806 was everything. Everything was a problem. When I was a young beginning installer, the joke at the shop was, and this is when I worked for someone else, if you have to go trim out an 806, you better take 3 of them with you, because then you've got better odds that one of them might actually work. And it wasn't just the master stations that were problems. It was remote stations also. These went through many changes. This one is from 1985. This is my shop remote speaker. This would be an I think it's an ISA 85. The A denotes it's been revised, and it was revised many times. Bolster up our ability to possibly fix this, we have a wide range of documentation that maybe will help us. We have the full-on service manual, printed in March of 1985. Not the original service manual. The original service manual is this one. And this was printed in May of 82, just before it came out. And this has some information in it. It has a lot of parts lists, which is good because it helps sort out what you need. It also has a lot of schematics and fold out pages, and all of that's very good. Although this only applies to the earliest models that they manufactured, because there were so many changes with them that this rapidly became obsolete. There was also, we have an owner's manual also. It's a copy. It's not an original one, but just in case. Although I do know how they work. We also have a troubleshooting guide. NuTone was not big on putting out things like troubleshooting guides, but in the case of the 806, because it was radically different than any other model they had ever made, they decided to do this to sort of have a workaround for problems, and it has step-by-step about adjustments and things in troubleshooting chart. The odds of actually finding your problem in this, not very good. And that was back when these things were new. Now that it's been, let's see, this was 1982 and now it's 2024. You do the math. You're not going to find the answer to your problem with your 806 in this manual, that's for sure. There are also addendums to the troubleshooting here that you're supposed to put in the binder with that one. Then we have the full-on service manual. This is a proper NuTone service manual printed in March of '85, and it's got the full-on installation instructions. It's got installer's troubleshooting guide, timeout and adjustments, theory of operation, circuit descriptions, circuit board diagrams, both sides, front and back, all kinds of voltage charts, parts list, and then we also have a rarely seen full-size fold-out all-board schematic sheet, highlighted with all the changes. See the little gray dots? Those are all the modifications and changes that were made to the boards throughout its production life. And actually, as an example, to show you what a problem this system was, we're going to pick a board here that I think will be interesting. So one of the boards in this is the control and audio board. And this lists all of the parts that are on that board, which is a great thing to have. But then here on the next page, changes, control and audio board. And it lists all of the dates, months and years, and all of the changes that were made to that board between August of 1982 and January of 1983. And there are actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. There are 20 changes that were done to that board. And the idea of this is, if you're an authorized NuTone service center and you had a ladies IM806, the original version, in your shop with problems, you would go through and check and see if your board had these modifications, and if it did have modifications, where the modifications were cut off and what additional modifications you would need to do. And these are not minor things to do. These are fairly time-consuming and complicated things to do. As an example, let's pick one that would be particularly good. Here's one, revision R170, January 1983. Cut PCB line from X102 pin 13 to R112. Add a 220 ohm resistor in series with the cut to prevent Z110 from miswiring. I'm not sure what the miswiring thing's about, but that's not a trivial thing to sit and do on a circuit board, especially when there are 20 of them to do if your set has none of these. And there are similar things for other boards in the set also. It would be easier in the way, as I recall correctly, NuTone, you would send in, if you had a board problem, you would send it back to NuTone. They would send you a board that was more updated than the one you already had. This is why it's referred to as the dreaded 806. Not good back in 1982, not good when it was discontinued in 1985, and not good 40 years later, because not only do you have possibly a lot of original sort of problems with it, but also you've got all the 40-year-old problems with it. The other problem with 806s is, and this was a classic example of NuTone trying to do too much. They were out on the bleeding edge of things with electronics at the moment. It was not designed as well as it should have been. Some of the components, and some of this will be obscure to many of you who are not in this world in great detail, but almost all the integrated circuits used in 806s are what are referred to as 4000 series CMOS ICs. All you really need to know about 4000 series CMOS ICs is they don't like static electricity. If you walk across your carpet and shuffle your feet, you know how you do, and then you touch your finger on a doorknob and you get a little spark? That'll kill an 806. Because 4000 series CMOS ICs are very static sensitive, not like the later ICs, the 74 series ICs that were made later on that have more static protection. 4000 series CMOS ICs, if you look at them sideways and squint at them just a little bit, they'll blow up on you because that's just what they do. So it's got all kinds of problems with that. And also in today's world, those ICs, they're difficult to find. I actually have in the parts room, I have about 24 brand new remote stations like this. Not because I'm ever going to sell them. They have actually almost zero value. Nobody ever calls and said, hey, have you got any ISA 85s? I could use a couple of them for my 806 system. Nobody ever said that sentence. Not ever at all. But what they are good for is, and one of the things about the 806 is this is what's referred to as a decentralized system, which means that you have individual controls for individual functions on every single station. You don't have system-wide controls on the master. They're spread out everywhere, and you have fairly complicated circuit boards in the remote speakers. And the reason I keep the new old stock ones that I have in the parts room is because all these boards are loaded up with 4000 series CMOS ICs, and when you need them, you can rob them off. So as a unit, it's worthless. For parts, they're not bad to have. It helps bridge the gap if you can't find what you want, and they are new, so that's okay. So this one came in from a customer. She was having her kitchen remodeled, and part of the remodel was this was facing on one side of the wall, and the customer wanted it flipped around and face the other side of the wall. I don't know all the details of that, but that's what I was told. So the contractor, who seemed like a conscientious guy, took it all apart, unwired the terminal board, removed the wall housing, took it all out, cut a hole in the other side of the wall, put the wall housing back in, put everything back together, wired it all back up, and as soon as he turned it on, it did this. So after everyone freaked out, they finally got a hold of me, and we did some troubleshooting back and forth over the course of an afternoon on the phone, and he was very good about it. Everything I suggested to try, he did, and nothing helped. And then what it came down to is he's the unlucky contractor who was the last guy who touched it, and now there's a problem. I did explain to the homeowner, because I talked to her also, she seemed very nice, that it's not really his fault. He just happens to be the guy who touched it. And it was bound to probably happen sooner or later anyway, so don't blame him. Not really his fault. He is responsible for helping get it fixed and doing whatever else needs to be done at the house. And they took it out and packed it up, and here it sits. So how are we going to approach this? Because this is complicated. These are not a model that I've worked on very often, well, not for the last 8 years. So how are we going to start? And I've just decided on the spot right this second, it's going to be a multi-part video because I've already gone on and on and on and on about this, and I haven't even actually picked up a screwdriver yet. So it's going to be multi-part. This will be part one of the long saga of the IMA806. How we're going to start is we're going to do what I call intercom triage. I'm going to gather up my supply of 806 circuit board. I'm pretty sure that the problem is going to be either in the intercom module or in the control and audio module. Modules are circuit boards. That's what NuTone used to call them. I don't think it has anything to do with the display board. I'm pretty certain it doesn't have anything to do with the AM/FM tuner board, and it probably doesn't have anything to do with the power supply board, although all of that is going to get rebuilt once we get the problem solved, because you have to factor in the age of the unit, and when I send it back, I want it to go hopefully another 20 years before I see it again. Intercom triage is a fairly straightforward thing to do most of the time. I have and own one complete and perfect set of boards for almost any NuTone intercom made since 1973. Anything before that doesn't work that way. There's no interchangeable boards, so it's a different process. There is no such thing as a perfect set of boards for an 806. They changed them and modified them and changed them. So what do you have? When was it made? When was it modified? Which version was it used with? It becomes very complicated. But the point of Intercom triage is to try to narrow down which board, hopefully it's only one, that actually has the problem, so you can focus your attention on solving the problem instead of horsing around with all the other boards. So that's going to be in part 2. We're going to try to figure out which board it is that has the problem, and once we know that, then we can focus on what's wrong with that board and get it fixed. And after we get it fixed and it functions correctly and this is gone, then we'll work on rebuilding it and refurbishing it to make sure it has longevity and I don't get to see it again for a long time. This is the end of part 1. Tomorrow, we're going to start part 2 by doing our intercom triage and see what we can find out, because it's late in the day and I'm not starting it now. I hope you found this interesting, and perhaps for someone, and if you got an 806, hats off to you if it still works, you find it interesting and helpful. If it is, give it a thumbs up on YouTube, because that'll help us just a little bit. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell, and when you click on the bell, click on it to receive all notifications, and every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. Oh, keep your fingers crossed for the poor NuTone service center owner here who has to work on this thing, because it's bound to be exciting. See ya.